Welcome back to Behind the Lines. We're with Ira Wolfe, and we're talking about the job market. Let's talk about the pace now and how change has been happening, how different it is now.
You know, I hear a lot from employers and reading and a lot of interviews and a lot of talking with people. And everyone says, but don't you think, I mean, we've lived through this before. I mean, don't you think that we'll come out of this okay? And there's a lot more skepticism now than there was in the past, but I think that's one of the issues. However, if you look back, and this goes back to this Ed Gordon, who wrote a book, The 2010 Meltdown. Okay. And that if you look back through history, and I don't remember the first two eras, but it was kind of the prehistoric almost era, the agricultural era, and it took centuries. I mean, we literally lived in that era, and so the jobs evolved, and then certainly with the printing press changed the way communication happened.
Yes.
And so that was a huge change, and that moved into the second era. But going back to what our recent history is, when the industrial age started, in roughly about 1850, the industrial age really moved for 120 years. I mean, we lived in the industrial age from 1850 to 1970. And then for the world economies and the oil crisis and starting a globalization and things, it radically changed. But we lived in that stage. So people who lived through cycles there said, yeah, we came out of it. But they came out of it at a higher rate of development or a higher stage of development in the industrial age. Okay. But then all of a sudden the people in the industrial age, kind of in the 50s and 60s, when they finally figured out what they were going to be when they grew up, when the new evolution of their business, they found themselves in the computer age. And the computer age was certainly computer-based. Information needed data, a lot of data. It needed information workers. It was different than just manual labor, getting up early with the chickens and going to bed when the sun set. It was more thinking. And that era lasted 40 years, or really at the end stage of that, where 10 years ago with the dot-com boom and globalization, that was all new. And now you look at what some of the newer technologies and how business is conducted, and business could be virtual, and you can have your administrative department in anywhere. It could be another part of the state, another part of the country, another part of the world. So it's changed. So the computer age only lasted 40 years. Industrial age lasted 120. Prior to that, they were literally centuries. They're predicting now what's called the cyber age, the cyber mental age.
Okay.
And they literally are predicting that this evolution will be 7 to 10 years. They're saying everything that's happening now, when we come out of this at the other end, it will also be a different way of doing business. And what's key to that is the nature of business. It's not what business you're in, and it's not the names of the business, but it's the nature of work, that even if there are assembly workers, they're not going to be people lined up in a factory putting nuts and bolts into a bag. They are going to have to be computer operators. They are, and beyond that, I mean, so it even leads into what type of education, so what type of opportunities are there for a lot of the people. One of the things is we used to make a decision at high school, or even during high school. Do we go beyond high school, or do we just get a job? Do we go to the service? Do we go to a trade school for a year? Do we go to a VOTEC school or a career academy? Or do we actually go and get a 2-year associate degree? Or, and these are all ors, or do we get a bachelor, a 40-year degree? Or do we continue to go for a professional degree? So we always had this hierarchy that you made a decision, do you get one degree or the other, and it just went up the ladder.
Right.
In today's world, the jobs that are required now require multiple degrees. So if you have a 4-year degree, and I know parents don't want to hear this, putting their kids through college, and people who are still paying off their college debt don't want to hear this either. But if you have a 4-year degree, essentially that's the old equivalent of a high school diploma. And there are no jobs for that. Now, there are jobs for 4-year degree, but it's just because employers raised the bar. Now, I will also be the first to tell you that not every person needs a 4-year degree first. In time, they probably will. So in addition to having a 4-year degree, you also need to have a 2-year technical associate degree in something, and it's a technical skill. So in addition to having that 4-year liberal arts degree that helps you understand how the world operates, and about history and about how to write, and higher levels of math, you also need a technical skill. Just having a liberal arts degree isn't enough. Just even coming out of engineering school isn't enough, because you have to have a trade or some technical skills that teach you how to apply that. So where in the past, to tell somebody that has a 4-year degree or even a master's degree that, you're, I hate the word, it's not overqualified, but you don't qualify for their job, and they give you this history of what they've done, and they're saying, but you really haven't kept up. What we're really looking for is a 2-year degree of a specialty or some type of technical trade program or some type of certification. So people that even have multiple degrees, higher level degrees, are being forced to go back and getting lower level degrees, because that's what's current now. That's the current knowledge.
So do the opportunities then lie in a niching?
Oh, it's niched. Well, that's an interesting question. It's a niche but transferable skill. So the reality is that the kind of the liberal arts, master's, whatever, that 4-year degree is transferable. If you've learned, and I always give this example of myself, I came from a profession that was a trade. I mean, most people looked at it as a technician, as a dentist. Okay? Most people looked at it that, well, you knew how to drill and fill, okay, and take x-rays and give anesthesia and do things. And yet, what I always loved about it was the problem solving, the critical analysis. In healthcare they call it differential diagnosis. The rest of the world calls it root cause analysis. But it was figuring out why things work and how things can be done differently and what can be done. So when I left, people said, "Well, what will you do? I mean, what do you know about business?" And I said, "Same thing I knew about before. I happen to run a business that hired and retained and motivated and developed employees. I delivered customer service. I solved problems, and that skill works anywhere." So what people have to learn is these transferable skills, or as other people have called them, mobile skills, that as the job changes, as the environment changes, you can transport those skills to almost any environment. Yet you still need the technical skills on the back end. You still have to know what the business is about.
Aha, and that's where the opportunity lies.
That's it.
We're going to take a brief break. We'll come back and we'll talk about what employers and employees need to know. Stay with us.